Good morning everyone, and welcome to another motorcycling video. Today is Monday the 18th of March 2024 and I'm off on my motorcycle looking for a place to start my morning run. Now logically you could say to yourself, well, why don't you just go out the door and start running? And I could have done that, but I was looking for a particular spot that I wanted to start my run on so that I could get in a certain distance and so forth. And so it turned out to be very useful in terms of talking about some other aspects of motorcycle safety which I have not covered in previous videos. As you can see, it's still dark. I left my house at about 20 past 6, I think, maybe half past 6, so it was still dark. The street lights are on. Motorcycle lights automatically come on in the dark. And there's a little bit of drizzle, and you'll be able to see that in the as it lands on the camera lens, and is also reflected in the street lights and things like that. So that gives a whole new dimension to riding, and I'm in the fortunate position of riding on a three-wheeler, which is of course much more stable and therefore safer than a two-wheeler, but nevertheless some things sort of universal for motorcyclists in wet weather. Now it was only very, very light drizzle. I should say that it was not heavy rain, and by the time I got where I was going, which is about 16 minutes from now, 5 or 6 k's from my house, I wasn't really wet. The clothing I was wearing wasn't really wet from the rain. It was my pants were wet from the seat, water sealing on the seat, but it wasn't really heavy enough to make me wet. But you can see there are raindrops on the lights and raindrops on the camera. So setting the scene, it's overcast, it's about 6:30 in the morning, there's a bit of drizzle around, and although mine's a fairly big bike, and you can see in the early going how strong the lights are, lights up the signs ahead of me and the distance ahead of me. It's a bit hard to see now because I'm in a busy, well-lit intersection, and mine is a big bike, as I've said, that should be visible in all sorts of weather conditions. There are still some things that are worth thinking about in regard to riding in wet weather. Now it goes without saying that if it goes without saying, then I probably shouldn't say it, but I'm going to say it anyway. It goes without saying that if you are heading off on a ride, have wet weather gear and carry it with you, because you never know, obviously, when the weather's going to break or turn, especially this time of year. We're now officially in autumn in Australia, and I've just seen this evening's weather, the guy on the weather talking about us going into a La Nina instead of an El Nino. Now, all of that means is there's a likelihood of rain over the autumn period. Carry your wet weather gear with you. And when it starts to rain, when it gets a bit drizzly, get off and put it on, because obviously it'll keep you dry, and in keeping you dry, it'll reduce fatigue, because if you're wet, you'll get cold, and when you get cold, you'll get fatigued, and you'll get shivery, and you'll be uncomfortable. So if you have wet weather gear, put it on. Now, as I said, it wasn't raining heavily enough here for me to need wet weather gear, but had I been going on a longer ride than where I was, which is only a few k's down the road, I probably would have put on the wet weather gear. The second thing to do is, of course, as I've said before, make sure you are visible. Wear bright wet weather gear, have your lights on if your bike doesn't automatically have lights, a permanently lit headlight. Make sure your helmet is one that is reflective. It has reflective strips on it or something, and your wet weather gear has reflective strips on it. Be in the position in the lane where the drivers behind you and the drivers in front of you can see you. Now what I mean by that is the driver behind you needs to know that you're there all the time, because if you slow down, he needs to know, or they need to know, that you're slowing down, and they need to take appropriate action rather than run up the back of you. So that means sometimes maybe just changing your position in the lane a little bit. The driver that you are behind needs to know that you're there for the same reasons. If he stops or they slow down, you need to know that they're slowing down and take appropriate action. They need to give you plenty of warning that they're slowing down, especially in wet weather, because your traction and your grip on the tyres is reduced. And they need to signal their intention a little earlier perhaps, so that you've got time to respond and react to a turn if they're going to change direction, or turn corners, or change lanes, or any of those sort of things. So adjust your following distance. That means work out how far back from the car in front you need to be. In dry weather, it's supposed to be a 3-second gap. So somebody passes a marker on the road and 3 seconds later you pass the same marker. In wet weather, you probably want that to be a little bit longer because, as I said, the roads are slippery, traction is less secure, if you like, than it is in dry weather, and the potential for you to aquaplane, especially if there's a lot of water on the road or oil on the road, is much greater. And when it comes to two-wheelers, the advice that I've seen offered a few times, and I'm not going to dispute it because it seems to make sense to me, is to try and ride in the tyre tracks of the vehicle in front of you. Now, the reason I say that is because that car that's in front of you has already squished the water away off the road. So for those few seconds before the rain settles in, unless it's really heavy rain, of course, then for that few seconds while before the water settles back into that tyre track, the road is a little drier. The car in front of you has squished the water to the sides, the road is a little drier, and therefore your traction or your grip on the road is a little better. Now, not sufficient to say, well, I'll just ride in his tyre tracks and I'll be fine, but nevertheless, it's a bit better than riding in the middle of the lane. And the reason again for that is because oil slicks and things like that tend to end up in the middle of the lane. When you're doing things like you see here, I live in Goulburn, and Goulburn has a number of names. One is the City of Roses, the other is the Lilac City, and the other is the City of Roundabouts. And I think on this road I've passed through about 6 roundabouts already. And at roundabouts and giveways and all that sort of stuff, give yourself much more time than you would in dry weather to be able to slow down or if necessary stop. You can only control the things that you're doing. I remember saying in a previous video, you can't control what the other driver is going to do. If you have the right of way at a giveaway sign, in other words, the giveaway sign is with him, do not assume that he or she, I keep saying he, but it could be he or she, do not assume that they would automatically give way. We have red light cameras and things like that because people run red lights. So make some sort of eye contact with the driver that's on the giveaway sign. If it's a roundabout, the law that, as best I can understand, is the first vehicle on the roundabout goes first. Now, there's no point in you arguing and saying, well, I was on the roundabout first if vehicles coming in opposite directions are trucks and cars, because you're going to come off worst. So again, make some sort of eye contact if possible with the driver of a car that appears to be advancing through the roundabout at the same time as you are. You see, just right here where I'm stopping now, where I'm going through this roundabout now, I made a point at this roundabout of waving at the driver that was on my left there. Although I was already on the roundabout, I wanted to make sure that he saw me and that he was prepared to stop and let me go through the roundabout. So if you can do that kind of thing, make contact with the eye contact of some sort with the drivers that are approaching the roundabout at the same time as you are. And if there isn't any doubt, you be the one to give way. Because, like I said, there's no point in arguing about it afterwards. You are going to come off second best in any altercation with the vehicle, whether your bike's a two-wheeler or a three-wheeler, you're still going to come off second best. If you're in any doubt as to who's going to give way here or who should go first, and the other other driver doesn't seem to be slowing down, then you be the one to slow down. Because, as I say, you're going to come off second best. So these roads here are all suburban roads in Goulburn, and although most of them are reasonably well lit, and as you can see now it's getting a little lighter, the rain's not all that heavy, and it's getting a little lighter. The sun is coming up. They're all well lit. They will have markings down the centre of them, and for the most part they have those white lines. In some cases even have those things that are called like rumble strips on the edges of the road. So if you do happen to deviate too close to the shoulder in some cases, the rumble noise will certainly alert you to that fact. Things to think about when you're out in wet weather. As I said, carry your wet weather gear with you. Wear it when it starts to get, even if it's only even if you only think it's a sun shower or it's only going to be a sprinkle, put it on. And if it turns out that you were right and it was only a sun shower or a sprinkle, then of course you can stop, pull over, and take it all off again. The difficult part about wet weather gear is gloves, because gloves are not always waterproof and they end up getting soggy. I'm very fortunate on my Spyder that I have heated grips, which I never thought I'd use until I had them. But then there are days now when I just turn them on because they're there, and it keeps your hands warm, obviously, and makes the ride a little bit more enjoyable. If your gloves are not waterproof and they end up soggy, then that makes your hands cold, of course, and that makes operating the controls a little bit more difficult, and that leads to difficulty with response times, especially managing the clutch and the front brake and so on. On the Spyder you don't have those issues because there is no clutch in the first place, and there is also no front brake. There's only one pedal that operates both brakes, all three brakes. So there's two discs on the two front wheels and the rear one, and I said there's no clutch because it's a semi-automatic transmission, so there is no clutch. But if you're on a two-wheeler, most two-wheelers, whether it's a scooter or a bike, you're either going to be operating the clutch and the front brake, or in a case of a scooter, you're going to be operating both front and rear brakes to try and manage your reduction in speed and slow down so that you maintain traction, so the rear wheel doesn't lock up. If you've got ABS on your bike, you're going to be fortunate in that way, but you don't want the rear wheel to lock up. You don't want to be aquaplaning. You don't want the back wheel to start sliding out underneath you because the road was slippery and lost traction and so on. So I set out this morning with this. I said with the intention of going to a particular spot, which you'll see at the end of the video, starting my run from that spot, doing a circuit around Goulburn, which is about a 12k circuit. I can tell you that now because I've already done it and I'm recording the audio later. Do a 12k circuit around Goulburn, and then I set off again. By that time the sun had come up and it was bright and sunny. The drizzling had pretty well stopped, and I took another ride around town, which I'll be able to explain to you in more detail or talk to you about in the next couple of videos. So I think what I'll do now is just leave you to enjoy the scenery for the next few minutes till I get to where I was going. And I'll say thank you for watching and listening if you've got to this point. A bit of a rambling video, but I'm trying to make the point about being extra cautious in wet weather, giving yourself extra stopping time by being a little bit further back from the car in front of you, and allowing yourself extra time to reduce speed rather than having to jam on the brakes and have a risk of rear wheel losing traction or something like that. So thank you if you've got to this point, and thank you for watching and listening. If you have any comments or any feedback, then please add them in the comments below, and when I become aware of them, I will respond to them.